Hey, welcome to New Game Plus TV live on Twitch. You might be hanging out with us on Twitch on C31, C44, or listening as a podcast. I'm Crinj. This week I'm joined by Millie and Jason, who all three of us actually have so many places that we could go. We can leave the house whenever we want. Millie, you've been able to do this for ages, but
I'm still going to celebrate.
Yeah.
It's great for you guys.
But I mean, like you're leaving the house to walk around Queensland, so.
Oh, up your bum.
Millie, you have been playing, or both of you have been playing Spiritfarer, which is
a
cute little indie game. You were saying earlier, it's just a very good sort of like just chuck on in the background or whatever, mindless-ish game, but in like a good way.
I would say that yes, but for me personally, if you know me personally, you know I'm sort of into that sort of death stuff because I'm trying to be a mortician. So this game is like hitting all those good feelies. So like I'm ready to like go off on how superb this is. And I'm actually really excited to hear Jason's opinions on it because we had a little discussion before we started, and it's really interesting to hear someone else's opinions because from my perspective as a death enthusiast, that it's really well done, but hearing from someone who's not, like I'm hearing these different things that they're experiencing with their playthrough. It's super interesting. I'm excited.
If you're concerned about my sad boy credentials, I assure you that's what drew me to it. When I'm like, oh, here's Chara, and I'm like, oh, they're off to a great start. We're talking about like ghosts and shit. I'm on board. But it has been interesting to hear your perspective. I'm really actually keen to get that on tape, if you will, and go into it in further detail.
That's how we still record TV on tape. And Jason, you've been playing Wash Dogs Legion.
Yes, washing a lot of dogs, but lots of clean dogs. One of the restrictions that did change with Dan Andrews changing the restrictions was that dog grooming is allowed again. So we've been washing dogs pretty heavily. The Legion, there's a legion of them. They're all lined up, ready to go. They were social distance. No, actually they weren't, because they were middle uppers, and middle uppers seem to be the ones who ignore basically every requirement that we need to do in Melbourne. But no, Watch Dogs is fine. I want to go into the main thing. This is kind of a teaser. The main thing with Watch Dogs that annoys me is that it's nowhere near as interesting a game as it could have been, but the questions that it doesn't ask are far more interesting than the questions that it does ask. And so I want to kind of go into how it failed, but also how it succeeded in asking questions about better properties than it is. So, yeah.
Interesting. All of that's coming up, but first, let's get into the gaming news headlines of this week. Bethesda's next big RPG, Starfield, will be powered by an overhauled creation engine, whose capabilities will be a large leap forward than the one seen from Morrowind to Oblivion. In a keynote appearance for the Develop Brighton Digital Conference, Bethesda Game Studios creative director Todd Howard said that the sci-fi RPG will rely more on procedural generation than past Bethesda titles did. Speaking with GamesIndustry.biz, Howard said, quote, "From rendering to animation to pathing to procedural generation, I don't want to say everything, but it's a significant overhaul. When people see the results, they'll hopefully be as happy as we are with what's on the screen and also how we can go about making our games," end quote. Publisher Bethesda said most recently that The Elder Scrolls 6 will follow Starfield's release, coming years from now. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War may not take up as much storage as originally thought. Developer Treyarch has clarified that storage requirements may be lower if players don't want all of the modes installed. When players install Black Ops Cold War, they'll have to install the whole game, but will be able to uninstall the modes they don't want after that. The full game will take up about 90 gig for last-gen consoles or 140 gig for next-gen. Meanwhile, PC players will need 35 gig for multiplayer, 82 gig for the full standard game, or 125 gig for ultra graphics assets. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War is set to be released on November 13th. Joe Biden's US presidential campaign has launched its own Fortnite map called Build Back Better with Biden. Made in Fortnite's creative mode, the map has 6 challenges to promote Biden's Build Back Better policy agenda, including sliding down ice cream slides and finding Kamala Harris's sneakers around the city. Earlier this year, the Biden team also released custom codes for Animal Crossing New Horizons yard signs, as well as a full Biden-themed island that players could visit using a dream code. And that is the news of this week. Look, I'll get into the US election thing last, because we'll probably go on.
To be fair, we don't really cover politics on our shows.
Never.
So
News Game Plus has never been political.
Fine.
I don't know why we've never shelving that for a second.
I mean, Dermy makes a point of avoiding controversial topics, so it should be fine.
Listen to News Game Plus if you want to. At your own peril. Starfield. Starfield is the Skyrim Fallout, but in space game from Bethesda, who I mentioned in that news report, I guess. Publisher Bethesda, but I'm like, Bethesda's not the publisher anymore. It's Xbox.
It's Microsoft, yeah. Yes, no. So every Skyrim, Oblivion, they all have that kind of long beaker from the Muppet face because that's the limitations of their creative characters. Yeah. So at its core, they've always had these same problems with this engine. So if the one good thing that comes out of all this is that is now gone, hip hip hooray, it won't be missed.
Install sizes in general for next gen is with the Xbox Series X being a terabyte and the Xbox Series S, digital games only, 500 gig internal storage, expansion is real pricey. I really hope a lot of devs kind of get on board with the variable install size, where it's okay, you can install chapter by chapter, even if it's not necessarily an episodic game.
The fact that you can put in a USB 3 separate hard drive and then leave space. So the way I'm planning to do it, because I'm not going to spend $300 on the memory card.
Hot swapping games on and off your hard.
Yep. And so basically that's how you do it. Is you go, I'm going to this storage, I'm going to have it extra, and you go, cool, I want to play it. So I'm going to have it. I've got this on this hard drive. I'm just going to transfer it into the internal memory, and then that's going to be the plan.
Joe Biden's U.S. presidential campaign. How much? Because Millie, you were really into the Animal Crossing map. It wasn't
I loved it.
There were signs.
It was a full island, dude. Full island.
It's a full island, yeah.
It was so cute, and little Joe Biden's running around in his little suit saying "Vote for Joe Biden." But yeah, there's signs everywhere, and it was just a basic island. But I just really think that I know you can call it pandering to the youth and everything like that, but
it's tough because you don't want to be hail corporate, hail shilling. But when it's organic, when it feels natural, it's okay. I mean, Japan are the kings of this. They'll have campaigns, and it's an advertising campaign.
Megaphones.
Everything Japan does is a fucking advertising campaign. But it feels natural. It's this is cool. This is Evangelion versus Godzilla. Didn't know I wanted to see that, but let's do it.
Those are the gaming news stories of the week. Stick with us. We've got more video game goodness coming up in just a second. Back with us here on New Game Plus TV, live on Twitch. You might be joining us on C31, C44, or as a podcast. I'm Crinj. I'm here with Millie and Jason. And both of you have been playing Spiritfarer. This is a cute little looking, it's not a pixelated kind of game. It's a quaint 2D side-scroller game, but it's a fair bit more than that. Millie, what is going on?
So basically, Spiritfarer was developed by a Canadian studio called Thunder Lotus Games, and it's available on everything, which is great for my little Mac butt. So I can play it on my Mac.
It doesn't take off into space.
No, it doesn't actually, which is fantastic because Sims makes it takes off into space. But basically what you do is that you're sort of dumped in the middle of something already happening. You play as Stella, who is a little, I would say, African-American character. She wears a little star hat and it's adorable, who is meeting Sharon, who is basically the god of death in I think is it Norse mythology? You can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Charon's Greek. It's
Greek.
the boatman of the river Styx. Anyway, that's me being a fuck. Someone called me a geek earlier, so I might as well lean in.
Yeah.
It's fine because I didn't actually know that there was actual Greek reference to it, so I was just oh, okay, sweet.
Yeah.
So you meet the shepherd of the death basically on a blood red river, and you're oh, this is a bit weird for a cute game. But Sharon tells you that you are the new Spiritfarer, and then he retires, which essentially means he dies. And then you play as Stella just running around on this awesome ship, collecting spirits who are they're stuck. That's probably the best way to put it. They're stuck. And ultimately, all the spirits you meet is someone who Stella knows, which is awesome. So, for example, the first spirit you meet is Gwen, and I know, Jason, you have a lot of opinions on Gwen.
Later, finish the explanation first.
But basically, Gwen is one of her besties. So that sort of rings you in, and Gwen takes you through the game and everything like that. But basically, what you're doing is that you are ferrying these spirits to make them content, so they're not stuck anymore. And then you take them to the Everdor, which is the beginning and end of everything. You push them through, and then they peacefully release. That's basically the premise of what you're doing in the game. But in between all that is, I found a nice little quote, if I can find it in my lost amount of
notes, where my notes shit.
Basically, what the game devs call it, is a cozy management game about dying. So what you're doing is, it's very compared to, for my opinion, from what I've played in the past, Animal Crossing. So to grow like vegetables and to mine iron and to collect like lightning in a bottle and everything like that, is you have to do these processes to get things to build new buildings. And to make your spirits happy that have boarded your boat, you have to build them houses. So you have to get the resources to build the houses, that sort of thing. So it's like a little resource management game, but in between all that, like, you get like for me, like, you get really, really, really involved in these characters. And as much as Jason doesn't like Gwen, by the time I sent her through the gate, I was having big feels, because when I play this game, I play as Stella. And from what she was saying to Stella and everything, I felt like they had such a close relationship. Like, it's like this weird deer and this little girl. But then you start to realize that this game is a lot more about reality than like fantasy animals going through like a death gate and release them and everything. It's actually speaking about Stella's life. Stella knows these people.
I would say probably like, it feels the Monster Rancher, and like, I think that's what its strength it really is the fact that, like you say, you're absolutely right. It's you're the boatman of the dead. You know what I mean? Don't pay the ferryman, the whole shebang. Like, and yet here you are, basically like helping the spirits of those that you know depart from whatever particular thing was holding them, or whatever particular kind of block they were having to just releasing into thing. And so talking through those issues and helping to understand these characters is what drives you to play the game. The game at its core, like you say, it's super simple. Mini games and resource management, mini games, all these kind of things. So at its core, it's not a game you're playing necessarily for the feedback loop, the gameplay loop. The gameplay loop is simple, it's easy, it's charming, it handles well. Like the platforming sections, Stella herself actually handles very well. Oh, yeah. But it's not the driving force for this. You want to see the resolution for. Well, I don't want to see the resolution for Gwen. It won't make me sad. I promise you. She take the passive aggression and just go off into the nothingness. Like, get the fuck out of here. But like everyone else, you're like, cool, well, you don't know what their block is, but over time, like you say, you have these conversations and you start to understand more and more. Oh, okay, so that's kind of, they'll talk about, and then they'll come up to the point that sticks with them, and you just see it kind of like weigh on them, even in their text. It's all it is text, like, and their blah, 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 speech, but like, you can see it in the text, like, okay, so you're building towards that. And while it sounds like I'm downplaying it when I say, oh, it's okay, so it's, she wants to go with her partner, she wants to blah, blah. Like, you look at that and you go, well, no, like, I'm underselling it. You read these little flavor texts for these characters and dealing with all their stuff, and it becomes way more about, helping to understand Stella's relevance, which I still don't understand in the grand scheme of things, because I'm not as far as you into it, with balancing, these characters and helping them come to terms with their passing, if you will.
And also, I just want to add to the point that you were saying that this was written by like a woman or someone of color or anyone who is into like cultural stuff. I would say it's not really a spoiler, because as you speak to Summer more, you realize she's actually LGBT.
Yeah.
So there's LGBT reference in this game, which is fantastic. And it's not like, here it is, it's right in your face. Like, look at us, we're supporting this sort of thing.
That's saccharine kind of,
good. Like, it feels so natural that, like, because Summer is LGBT. It didn't feel forced or anything like that. And they cover actually some really important issues. I'm sorry, Jess. They cover really important issues, and you probably haven't reached this point yet, but the character of Alice.
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. I was wrecked at the end of her story. Like, they cover some really heavy issues to do with mental illness and everything like that. Like, this game is like really broke me in. Like, as much as like Gwen is sort of a basic character and you send her off and everything, and Atul hangs with you for a while, you just feed him food and everything. But once it got to like Summer, Alice, Astrid, and Giovanni, like those stories started to really develop and woo! Like, it just for a loop.
I think it's a game that really lends itself to something like the Switch, where you can, or like Millie said with MacBook, laptop, you can take it with you and just play it wherever. I think this is a Switch game. Jump on a bus or a train now that we're allowed to. Go wherever. Just play a game and go mine some resources. Go do whatever. It's as good a Monster Rancher game as you'll get. Dealing with that kind of the things of death and regret and all these things, and it just does a really good job of being this charming little indie game that doesn't insist upon itself. It doesn't doesn't say, oh, you need to feel sad at this part. It just says, here's a thing that happened. Feel how you want to feel, and I don't cry because men don't cry. I've heard that somewhere, but like, but it was like, that was really cool. Like, I really like the way that, as they start to reveal themselves, you start to feel more attached to them. And again, when I send Gwen off, I won't be sad, but maybe I'll be sad when Atul finally goes. Maybe I'll get him his fried chicken, and then he'll go, cool. You know what? I've had a visit from the Colonel. That was my secret love affair all those years ago. Can you take me to China? I'm like, okay, cool. Let's just get him out of here. But yeah, I agree with Millie. It's definitely a recommend from me.
Oh, yeah.
So, Spiritfarer is out now on Steam via PC, Mac, and Linux, PS4, Switch, Xbox One. It's out on Stadia, but if you want to try some streaming goodness, you can download it on your Xbox One currently, probably Xbox Series, and you can actually stream from your home console to your iPhone or your Android phone when you're out and about. That streaming is actually pretty functional. If you've got NBN, you don't have a Switch, that's a reasonable alternative, so you can do that at the moment. That's Spiritfarer. Thank you for that review, guys. Stick around though, we've got more video game goodness coming up in just a little bit. You're back with us here on New Game Plus TV live on Twitch. You might be joining us via C31, C44, or as a podcast. I'm Crinj here with Millie and Jason. And Watch Dogs 2, I enjoyed 2017, I'm going to say it was. 2016 or 17, one or the other. And
Watch Dogs 1 or 2? 2. Yeah. That was 2017, 2018, one or two.
Was like the big next-gen game, and it was a big flop. And then Watch Dogs 2 was like, well, the bar was on the floor, so it did a pretty good job. And I enjoyed the writing and the characters, but it did hedge its bets a little bit in terms of some of the themes. The gunplay was good, which was a big improvement over the first one.
Yeah.
It wasn't perfect in the same way that a lot of Ubisoft games aren't perfect in terms of the feel of the gameplay, but it was decent. It was a solid all-rounder. Is Watch Dogs same sort of vein?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that's exactly the problem. The problem and the strength of Watch Dogs Legion. So I'm going to itch your ear suddenly. Anyway, better. The problem with Watch Dogs 1 was it was bland, and Aiden wasn't a good character.
It was terrible.
And so he was boring, and I get it, and I feel like I'm off to a bad start. All right, I'm just going to keep going because there's a point I want to make about Aiden, but I'm going to have to come back to it. So Watch Dogs 1 was fine. It was them experimenting with this style of game. It did okay for them. I remember being at E3 for the press, and they were making a big deal of it, and then you play it. It was like,
why do I care?
It's a decent game. Yeah. Like, it's okay. Watch Dogs 2 comes out. Gunplay's fixed. A lot of the elements are fixed. They feel more natural. They flow better. But the biggest problem is it's the disconnect between we're murdering cops and better get a photo for the gram. You know what I mean? So it's like, we're going to go and blow up this police station, which is quite literally a terrorist act. But then we're going to get a photo for the gram. And it's all these like kids with half their head shaved and fucking dreads and like all this colorful neon shit taking photos and going, yeet or whatever the fuck kids say. I don't know. And so it was just a huge disconnect because I'm like,
Jason, I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah. Like I understand that ISIS does a good job of recruiting on Twitter, but it doesn't sit there and go like it hasn't got neon colors and them sit out the front of technicals with like rap poses and stuff. So like it's just tone deaf. It's tone deaf to what a real insurgency would be like. It plays like a good Watch Dogs. It plays like 2 in a lot of ways, except, and this comes from being able to access anyone, you can't spec anyone up. right? So you with the first one, you go into this skill tree, you go into this skill tree, you go into that skill tree. The only real skill trees you have in this game are for gadgets and hacking, right? So you can access different drones, you can access different technologies and stuff like that, and you can access how many weapons you have, and then
stuff you had in Watch Dogs 2.
Yeah. And so then you can go, okay, now I can hack drones, now I can hack people's guns and stuff. So all the skills that you built up in 2, there's still things you can spec into, but you can't spec into people's physical skills. It does a lot of things where it's like, this could be a cool mechanic, this could be a cool mechanic, this could be a cool mechanic, but it leaves it at that real base level. You can recruit anyone, but that doesn't mean anything. And as a result, it's fine. It's a fun game. I've played a lot of this game and I've spent a lot of time with it, but it goes nowhere near being as good as it was. I wish it was a Tom Clancy game, because then I feel they may have given it a little more nous, but I feel like when they created it, they were confused about what they wanted to achieve with it, and it shows. And it's still YOLO Swaggins, we're going to murder some cops. The only person who brings it up is the goddamn AI who laughs at you about it. And I feel like all the story beats, while they make sense, they don't react to the core mechanics of the game well enough for it to matter. So
do you reckon they were confused, or they were just hedging their bets? Like on a lot of the gameplay, they didn't put the time in or have the mindfulness to pull it off. But on the themes, it seems like they were just like a little bit gun shy.
That is, thank you for that. That is a very good segue, because yes, that is probably the other main point. Is it feels again like Ubisoft are pulling their punches at the moment. Obviously, I understand they're going through a lot of scandals and stuff at the moment, and they don't want to be seen to be controversial. But they pussied out on Far Cry 5 real bad. Like, they real pussied out from saying anything.
Talk about that for a while.
Yeah, they pussied out on Div 2, and it feels like they pussied out here. And so the last point, I want to make, I feel that it's important to kind of cover off the fact that they've gone out of their way to kind of try and not offend anyone or try and be inclusive, and it hasn't worked. So I recruited an Asian dude as like a getaway driver. It was like his particular skill. He had the special car and all that. So I'm like, perfect. I need a real good getaway driver. You're recruited. Vietnamese name. So I'm all right. It's cool. Like, Vietnamese dude in London. That's definitely not uncommon for to experience. But then he's like talking with like a full on like black like Hackney accent, and I'm like, what the hell? And then like, I'm like, I understand that you're trying to say these are the voices of London, and I'm glad, I'm glad that there's Bumbleclad accents, and there's like there's a whole spectrum of what you would expect out of like London accents, but then they're misattributing because the system can't recognize the difference between the different things. And that's not to say that they all have to sound a certain way. And the last thing I would ever want a game to do is to lean into like miso soli like stereotypes to make a point, because it's the exact opposite of how the world is. But like, it just seems odd that that's the subculture accent that they would pick up when it's very unlikely they're part of that subculture. Like, it would have to be a very interesting story to have that. And obviously, as time goes on and as the world changes, that'll change. But they're using American slang in the wrong accent for what's kind of expected of their particular kind of subculture. It just doesn't work, and I say that as someone, like, grew up in Dandenong, very multiculturally diverse, like, area. I currently live in, in one of the most, like, old school, like, honky, like, Cantonese. Now there's mainlanders, lots of Malaysians. So I'm used to the gamut of Australian accents, in that some don't speak English at all, some speak English in very accented,
cultural Australian.
And some people have as bogan an accent as me. I've heard plenty of Vietnamese bogans, you know what I mean? So none of that is bizarre to me or out of place to me, but this seemed out of place. Like, this seemed really obviously like they were trying to obviously say, it doesn't matter, we're all residents of London. But look, but that said, they do lean a little bit hard into, this is London. London's fucking the best city in the world. I'm like, as an Irishman and an Australian, like, you can just fucking shove that shit right up your ass, like the cradle of colonization. But we're not doing a Pikmin review, so I'm just going to save that for when we do Pikmin.
That's next week.
But So look, Watch Dogs, it's okay. It's still a good game. If you enjoyed the last ones, the mechanics are solid, if a little underwhelming. Don't get caught up on the you can recruit anyone mechanic. It doesn't matter that much. Play with permadeath. I genuinely think the game is better with permadeath. It raises the stakes infinitely more than playing without permadeath, because then suddenly recruiting matters, and I think before that, recruiting kind of doesn't matter. So it's worth a play. It's not as good as it has the potential to be, and I it'll be interesting to see the Rainbow Six, like Tom Clancy franchises, do a similar kind of game, and I think that I would be way more interested in that as opposed to just playing as like Americans killing everyone. But yeah, this is, I guess this is how they get around that without it like upsetting the hardcore American Tom Clancy base. But play the game; it's decent.
Watch Dogs Legion is out now on Windows, PS4, Xbox One. It's going to be releasing on Xbox Series and PS5 when they launch. Thanks for that review, and that brings us to the end of the show for this week. If you want to see us on social media before next week's episode, you can do so on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, /NewGamePlusTV. Check out our latest Yakuza 7 review on youtube.com/NewGamePlusTV. We're live on twitch.tv/NewGamePlusTV every Thursday night, 8 p.m. And the New Game Plus website is, would you have guessed, newgameplus.tv. Millie and Jason, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you next time.